Hello and welcome to episode 18 of What Makes This Song Special. As always, I will be choosing a song that reminds me of something in my past, a moment in my life that has a song attached to it. I'll talk a wee bit about the song, the singer of the song, and in part two I'll follow up with my own cover version of said song. So this week's story takes me back to summer 1987. So we'd been on holiday in Italy. And I was about 5 years old, just about to start primary two at school. For any British folk listening, other countries have different schooling systems, so I don't know what it would be there. But primary two for us, about 5 years old. As always, we'd done the road trip. We'd done a road trip to Italy. We used to drive down into England, across the Channel into France, through Belgium, Germany, and then we'd choose either Austria or Switzerland, depending on the year, whichever way seemed the quickest, or whichever way we wanted to go, and then and into Italy, and we'd stay there for a couple of weeks with family, and then we were on our way back. So we're on our way back, having the same route back, and we were driving near Modena, which is in the north of Italy, near Bologna. It was late at night, and I remember being half asleep in the back of my mum and dad's silver Volkswagen Jetta, and there was a scream. It was first from my dad, and then my mum screamed my dad's name as we went straight into the back of a huge TIR lorry. So I don't know what TIR stands for, but you know the type of lorry or truck for you Americans. Huge, heavy goods vehicle. We went straight into the back of it. There was a loud bang and then silence, and I don't really remember the few minutes in between the crash and the emergency services arriving and people coming to pull us out of the car. It's surprising that I remember vividly so much of it, because I was only 5 years old, but I do remember lots of it. But there are gaps in my memory as to what happened at certain points. But I remember people coming to pull us out of the car, and I always remember my dad telling me and my brother not to step on the broken glass that was on the motorway when we get pulled out of the car. I remember that part quite vividly, and then I remember my mum screaming because she wanted the emergency services to take us with her in the ambulance, but they took her away in an ambulance quickly, and then another ambulance came to take me and my little brother Dario, who was about 2 years old at the time, and my dad. And I don't remember that part. I had to ask my parents a little bit about that, because I don't remember the part where we get taken in I remember my mum getting taken in the ambulance, and then I remember nothing until we got to the hospital, and then very vivid memories of the hospital. So I think what's happened is basically we were driven round a bend in the Italian motorway at full speed, and for some reason this huge lorry had just stopped right in the middle of the road, right in the middle lane. And as my dad came round the bend, it was night time as well. He just saw some lights, and there just wasn't enough time to stop the car. He tried to swerve, but it was just too late. So we went straight into the back of this lorry. So the next thing I remember, we were in this hospital corridor on these little benches outside the wards, and a doctor came out and took my dad away, and he told me to stay with my little brother Dario, who, as I said, was only about 2 at the time. He was crying, and I was sitting holding his hand, and it's amazing. Like, I think, when I was thinking about this a lot in preparation for this episode, I was thinking that even at that age, you have this instinct it just takes over you, and it's, to look after somebody who's smaller or more vulnerable than you are. I remember worrying about Dario because he was only young, but I was only 5 years old myself. But you do, it's an instinctual thing just to look after people in that kind of situation. I remember worrying about being alone and wondering why we hadn't seen my mum since the crash, but I don't remember crying. I don't think I cried. I was in complete shock. I was worrying, panicking, traumatised, but I wasn't crying. And I think in hindsight, I must have had copious amounts of adrenaline, coursing through my body, for me to have had that type of reaction. But I remember we waited in that corridor for what seemed like a lifetime, and eventually my dad came back out and he told us that everything was going to be okay. I don't think he really knew at that point if that was true or not. I remember asking him where mum was, and he didn't have a clue either. He didn't know, so we had to kind of go wandering and asking people where my mum might have been taken when she got to the hospital. So we wandered down this long corridor to another waiting area, and we sat for what seemed like forever, as it does in those situations, to find out if my mum was okay. So later, we found out what had happened was that my mum, who was pregnant at the time with my youngest brother Luciano, she'd worn her seatbelt in a sort of strange way. She didn't want to have her seatbelt over her bump, her stomach, because of the baby. So I think she'd put her seatbelt. I think she had her seatbelt on, but in a sort of strange way. I don't know how she'd done it, but it was to stop it going round her belly. And I think actually that had saved. They told Mum that had actually saved my wee brother's life, having had the seatbelt on like that. But unfortunately, because of the way my mum's seatbelt was on, she'd broken her back. She'd basically, her vertebrae just sort of concertinaed and crushed. And so, I mean, horrendous pain that she was in, and we were obviously very worried about her and hoping that she would be able to make a full recovery. But obviously, a back break's really, really dangerous. So, it's all a bit of a blur at that point, and I don't remember much more of the night. But apparently, my mum fought with the nurses and doctors to let us go and lie in her hospital bed with her, which she remembers obviously very vividly, but I don't remember that part at all. I think by that point I was probably just exhausted, and I remember waking up the following morning to bright sunshine in a room inside the hospital with my brother and my dad, and we were going to have to stay in Modena for a couple of weeks until she was well enough to be allowed out to get a flight back home to Scotland. So a bizarre time, and I don't really think about it that often. It's one of those kind of, when I mention it to people, they're always really interested in the story, because I suppose it's a massive event to happen in somebody's life, to have a major car accident, especially at that age. But I suppose it doesn't really come to my mind that often, apart from when, of course, the song plays. But it was such a bizarre time, and I think, the song in question, Take My Breath Away, which we'll talk about later, it reminds me of the weeks that followed. It reminds me of living in a hospital for a couple of weeks and making friends with other kids in similar situations. There was an older boy called Carmelo, who I always remember. I'll put a wee photo of us, me and my brother with Carmelo. He became our kind of best pal for a couple of weeks, and I don't know why he was in the hospital. Presumably a similar situation to us, but he became a wee friend for us to hang out with. And I remember that a lady came from like a charity organisation, and she brought us toys that had been bought by the charity for kids in those situations. And I remember getting this little yellow Ferrari, made by Burago. Burago are like Italy's version of Corgi. They're kind of like, they make wee model cars for collectors and for kids. And I've still got that little car somewhere. I think it's in the loft somewhere. And I think I got a red Ferrari Testarossa as well. I'm sure I got that from there as well. So we got some presents, a wee ball to play with, and some other things. And but I always remember the Ferrari. And we were, of course, in the hospital in Modena, which is the birthplace of the Ferrari car. So if you look at any Ferrari, it always says Modena underneath. Modena's quite a small city in Italy, but famous for a couple of different things. The Ferrari being probably its biggest export. So I remember towards the end of the stay, when we were kind of hopefully getting towards the point where we could go back home, we went one day to this garage in Modena, in the city centre, where our car was being kept, and it was unrecognisable. It was just, in fact, I'll leave a wee picture. I'll get a picture and put a picture of the car My mum had this Polaroid picture of it, and it looked like a tin can that had just been all crushed. And when you see the picture, you think, God, we're so lucky that we were okay. My mum was in a wheelchair at that point. I remember being so worried about her, wondering if she'd ever be the same, and if she'd be okay and make a full recovery. And but in that moment, I remember the day in Modena. I remember the sun was shining, it was roasting hot, and it just felt amazing to be back out as a family again for, after what was essentially a near death experience. Um, so we walked around this beautiful town where, as I said, it's the birthplace of Ferrari. It's where Enzo Ferrari was from. It was Luciano Pavarotti is also from Modena. I'm sure most of you know about Luciano Pavarotti. I'm sure I'll do a cover of a Pavarotti song at some point. But yeah, we're just with the sun coming out, and we were outside for the first time in a couple of weeks, and there was just this feeling that, hopefully everything was going to be okay. And something that always sticks with me in my mind when I think about the accident is that my brother Dario and I were both in car seats, and these were a rarity. In 1987, my mum and dad used to get mocked by friends and family for being so safety conscious when it came to me and my brothers. They always worried about what we ate and what we drank, and tried to get us out into the country away from pollution as much as they could, and that sort of thing. They were real kind of warriors, but for our health and well-being. And they often were mocked and slagged off for that. I had lots of friends who didn't even have or wear seatbelts in their car, never mind have car seats. And my mum and dad had gone to great effort to, when they'd got the car, to source car seats. They actually came from Germany, I think. I think they were actually Volkswagen car seats. But again, yeah, unheard of at that point. I didn't have any friends who had a car seat. And those car seats essentially saved our lives. I mean, we walked away from that crash with a couple of bruises. I don't think we would have been so lucky if it hadn't been for the car seats. So another thing to thank our parents for, along with the millions of others, I suppose, but for making sure we were in car seats and safe, or as safe as you can be in a car on a motorway. In the end, we were given a car by the Italian government, and we drove to Pisa to get a flight to London, and then from London back home to Glasgow. And I remember when we dropped the car off, I think it was at the train station. We had to get a train to Pisa train station, to Pisa train station to get to the airport, and we got in a taxi to get us to the airport from the train station, and the radio was playing, and the song was Berlin, Take My Breath Away. And I think it was only in that moment where we all sat again in the car and we knew we were about to get a flight home that we realised everything was going to be okay. We were back together. My mum was okay, albeit she had a bit of a journey to get back to full health and away from the terrible pain. But it looked like baby Luciano was going to be okay, and me and my dad and my brothers were okay. And I remember that song playing in the back of the taxi, and it now reminds me of that whole episode. It reminds me of that whole episode, and probably reminds me of that whole holiday now. So there you go. That's the wee story. That's why it's such a special song to me. The song, we'll talk about the song. Take My Breath Away was released by an American band called Berlin, and it was written by Giorgio Moroder and Tom Whitlock for the famous film Top Gear, which I don't think needs any introduction. In fact, there's been a re-release of that film just, I think, this week. But on a side note, Giorgio Moroder, who was one of the songwriters, was an absolute genius of 80s songwriting and production. If you haven't heard of him, you need to go and listen to some Giorgio Moroder stuff. He wrote the Scarface theme, the Midnight Express soundtrack theme, the Never Ending Story soundtrack, which is an amazing soundtrack as well. Songs like Together in Electric Dreams, classic song. Donna Summer's I Feel Love. Dozens and dozens. So many great songs, film soundtracks that he wrote, and I don't have time to go into them all, but give him a wee search and Google Giorgio Moroder and you'll be blown away by the man's talent, back catalogue of songs. He's often kind of described as being the godfather of disco. So really cool guy to kind of Google and have a listen to. Terry Nunn was the singer in Berlin. She had a really, really stunning voice. Beautiful tone, perfect for that 80s power ballad type song. Nice, powerful, great range. I've not done a lot of listening to her other stuff, so I can't comment too much on her vocal style. I won't bore anybody with a kind of vocal breakdown because I don't know her as a singer enough to do that. But I did see a YouTube video of her singing live just from a couple of years ago, I think 2019, just before the pandemic. And at 60 years old, she still looks and sounds absolutely incredible. So fair play to her. A very cool singer. And an awesome song. And that's, I suppose, where we finish today. A shorter episode today. But I hope you enjoyed it. A wee bit of a serious topic. But again, we were all okay, thankfully. And a bit of a miracle. But we all survived it. And the song, that's why the song's so special to me. Why is it special to you? If it is, please leave a wee comment as to why this song is special to you. What does it make you think of? What part of your life does it take you back to? If you're looking for vocal coaching, get in touch. I can teach from Zoom or Skype to anywhere in the world. I've got lots of clients all over the world that I teach on a daily basis. And please like, subscribe, share if you enjoyed it. I'll see you next week for another song. Thanks so much.